Good morning and welcome to this morning's press conference where we are launching our Jersey COVID app. I would now like to invite Julian Blazeby, who's Director General for Justice and Home Affairs, who is going to welcome you and to give an overview of the app this morning. Thank you, Julian.
Good morning and welcome. Today I'm delighted to be able to launch our Jersey COVID Alert app, which has been developed as a partnership initiative between the Government of Jersey and Digital Jersey. The launch of the free app is a welcome development and forms an important part of Jersey's response to COVID-19. Our government strategy in dealing with COVID is to ensure that the continued control and suppression of the virus in a safe and sustainable way that protects islanders and minimises overall harm. The Jersey COVID Alert app will offer an additional level of prevention and protection, supporting our existing on-island testing, safer travel regime and testing contact tracing programmes to control the spread of the virus in the island and help to interrupt the chain of transmission. The app forms a vital role in ensuring we can protect islanders. It provides us with important data regarding levels of transmission in the community so that we can control infection rates and let islanders safely continue with their day-to-day activities as normally as possible. I would encourage everyone to download the app. The more people who download and use the app, the more effective it can be in helping make connections that may otherwise have been missed. We've all had a part to play in suppressing the virus. By downloading the app, alongside other vital measures, such as following hygiene and physical distancing guidance, you'll be helping us to protect you, your family, and your community. The app uses Bluetooth to alert users if they have been exposed to another app user who has recently discovered that they have been tested positive for COVID-19. This will allow people to self-isolate quickly if they are exposed to the virus, reducing the risk of them infecting others. The app is designed to support existing public health measures by allowing islanders and visitors to assess their personal risk of infection and to be tested for the virus if they have been in close contact with an infected individual. This helps to provide a better island picture of infection rates heading into the winter period. We know that it can be hard to keep track of all the people we may have had close contact with, but it is vital if we want to keep the virus under control, we do this. The Jersey COVID Alert app helps make connections you might have otherwise forgotten or missed. The more of us using the app, the better it will work. We are stronger when we work together. I'd now like to hand over to Tony Moretta from Digital Jersey, who will detail how the app has been built with software developers Nearform, which uses the same technology as the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland, New York and New Jersey proximity tracing apps. Following Tony, we will then hear from Dr Ivan Muscat, who will explain why the app is so important as we enter the winter period. Following that, we will then open some questions through the media and through Facebook. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Julian. Good morning, everyone. Can we have the first slide, please? So I thought it would be helpful, as we've had some questions on this, to take you through the journey that's led to the launch of the Jersey COVID Alert app today. So you'll remember, obviously, that when COVID started, in many ways, beginning of the year, we had lots of stories. People talked about what role could smartphones play in the fight against COVID. We started to see papers coming out from around the world, from academic institutions, about the role Bluetooth could potentially play. And a lot of people have been checking up on how that could work. So we started working as Digital Jersey with the digital health team and the Allen Lab in the hospital at what the opportunity was to use it here. You'll recall it was back in April that Google and Apple announced that actually they thought the only way that we could achieve interoperability, particularly globally, for contact tracing apps was if they improved the operating system and added functionality to it. And we've kept a close eye on that since that announcement. You'll remember that the UK, for example, tried their contact tracing app in the Isle of Wight all the way back in May, and that was without using Google and Apple, and concluded, as did the rest of the world, that actually the way to go was using the Google and Apple functionality. We started to see apps using that functionality, including in Switzerland back in June. And then quite importantly for us, the 7th of July saw the launch of the COVID tracker app based on Nearform technology in Republic of Ireland. And as Julian said, that's been a tried and tested app that Northern Ireland and Scotland broke away from the NHS to use. We've also seen that used in small jurisdictions like Gibraltar, and very recently selected by New York and New Jersey and other US states like Delaware. And so by the time we got to early July, we made our recommendations to the Council of Ministers about the approach we'd like to take. We had the business case approved at the end of July. And then it's taken us about 8 to 10 weeks to tailor that app to work in Jersey. So our look and feel, health advice is very important that people of Jersey see it's their app with their advice, using the sort of language they've been used to hearing through this. And so, next slide, please. So in terms of how the app is going to work, so it has been released it is using the functionality used by Apple and Google. One of the slight issues those of you may have seen on social media, the Apple version is working today and can be downloaded from the App Store. There was a slight technical issue which Nearform have updated on the Google version for Android. That is actually going to be available later on today. So we would say keep checking the Google Play Store, and you'll see announcements later on today when the fixed version is out there as well. Fortunately, from our stats working with the telcos here, the vast majority of active smartphones in Jersey are Apple. So that is available now. And as I said, it's using the Apple and Google technology. Apple and Google are only approving one app per jurisdiction. So for the geeks amongst you, if you actually go into the settings, for example, on your iPhone and you look at exposure notifications, you will see identified that the public health authority that is active is for Jersey. And that's quite important. You do not want competing apps being used. It's free, obviously, to download. It will work on relatively modern devices. It has to be an iPhone 6S or above, or an Android 6. I'm told it's Marshmallow. I don't use Android. They do use some fun names. The app uses Bluetooth, so it doesn't use GPS. It uses Bluetooth to alert you if you have been near another app user that later tests positive for COVID-19. And actually, if you are diagnosed and you get a phone call from the contact tracing team, you will be able to anonymously alert other people that you've come in close proximity to so that they can take action to protect themselves and their families, their colleagues, etc. So moving on, a lot of people have questions about security and privacy. I'm sure there'll be lots of comments about this later on the Facebook pages, which I look forward to reading. And the app is voluntary. That's very important. And actually, other countries, the EU Commission, for example, has already said the app has to be voluntary to comply with regulations around all sorts of different issues. It's important to say no personal data is needed to set it up. Those of you who've already set it up will notice it doesn't ask for your name, address, any personal information. It does not use GPS. There is no tracking involved. Nobody knows where you are or where you have been. All data is stored securely on your device until it is needed, and then those device IDs that you come in close proximity to will be downloaded. So it is completely anonymous. Your identity is never shared until and unless you decide to phone up the contact tracing team and give them your details, just as with the existing system. And for those of you interested, we completed a full data protection impact assessment, and that has been approved. That has been published online. It's a transparent process. The complete source code from Nearform has been published online as well. And we also have a cross-government app advisory board in place to scrutinise further developments and upgrades as well. So moving on, it's worth saying, and I think Ivan will say something about this later on, it's a complementary approach. So the use of the app is in support of other measures. And it's worth saying that it complements other venue check-in. It doesn't replace you going to a venue and scanning the QR code or whatever and checking in. You still need to do that. And it's most effective when it complements those other contact tracing solutions. Its Bluetooth will detect nearby app users that maybe you don't know. So if you get a call from the contact tracing team, you may remember your family, well, hopefully you'll remember your family, but you'll also know other people you've worked with. You might not know the person you sat next to on the bus, and this is a good way of alerting people and filling in some of the gaps for the contact tracing team when you speak to them. Anonymous alerts are triggered instantaneously by the person who's tested positive, and that allows people who may have been exposed to take immediate action. And it's important to say that you are only able to trigger those alerts if you have spoken to the contact tracing team and they give you a code which will activate the app. So you can't trigger that yourself. You can't have somebody else triggering it if they haven't tested positive, if they haven't been contacted by the contact tracing team. And anyone who gets an alert is encouraged to make contact with the contact tracing team for advice and testing. So unlike some other apps you may have read about, the app will not tell you to self-isolate. It can give you some advice. That will be up to the contact tracing team to follow their normal processes. And the contact tracing team will provide whatever advice you need as they do right now. And in terms of using the app will run in the background when the device is locked. So you just have to download it and set it up. It takes seconds to do, and then you just leave it. There is a very, very low data requirement from it. We think less than 1 megabyte per week, so the equivalence of 6 minutes of browsing the internet. It has a minimal impact on battery life. That's one of the improvements that Google and Apple were able to make by building it into their operating system, that they are able to make sure that it doesn't have a detrimental effect on the battery life of your device. And studies say effectiveness can start as low as 15% of an active population. That's the population that are moving out and about within a jurisdiction. The pandemic stopping effect is when you get up to 70% of that active population uptake. Other countries haven't achieved 50%. We're hopeful that in Jersey we can have a community approach to this. As a small community, we're looking to work with lots of different people to make sure this is promoted because of the benefits. And we will be publishing as we go along selected metrics about app uptake and usage. And there will also be questions we're conscious about travel and the fact that we've already said the NHS-X has a different app for England and Wales, for example. The NHS-X app will not work here because obviously that is got advice with contacting the public health authorities in the UK. That won't work here. The Jersey app, as you said, is simple. We've kept it as straightforward as possible. It is just an exposure notification app. Inbound travellers to Jersey will be heavily encouraged to download the app, but actually we would hope to get interoperability between the different apps within the common travel area as early as by the end of this month. So that would mean that somebody coming here that has the NHS-X app on their phone already, it will be interoperable with devices using the Jersey COVID Alert app here as well. And there is work going on about European interoperability as well, working with our partners Nearform. And just finally, I touched upon this already. We've got the app, we've got the technology. The really important thing now is to get as high a take-up level as possible. And hopefully all of you watching here will play a role in that. There is functionality within the app to share it with your contacts, and we hope you use that as well. We are looking at key audiences. We'd like employers. For example, we've already seen some leaders of big employers in Jersey on social media this morning already saying that they will be promoting that to their colleagues already. But we want venues, we want GP, everybody to really get behind this push. And you've already seen as well as to traditional media outlets, we've got some of the key influencers on the island because we want a spread of people to say, not just techies, to say, actually, this is very easy to download and very easy to use. And the key message, as we said, is about using the Jersey COVID Alert app. It will help to contain outbreaks. It will help the contact tracing team do their job. And it will help, as Julian said earlier on, it will help people protect themselves, their families, their colleagues, and their community. And with that, and ahead of questions, I'll hand over to Dr. Muscat to talk about where this fits into the wider set of initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian and Tony. With the increasing number of cases all around us in Europe and in the UK, and as we go into winter, the threat from COVID is increasing dramatically. And so the greater the number of defences we have against the virus, the better we are. We all have a part to play in suppressing the virus, and we have already demonstrated that we can pull together as a community in this COVID outbreak. If as many of us download the app as possible and use it alongside our other defences, such as the current contact tracing system, and I would like to compliment the very hard work in managing to help contain the outbreak to date. And if we add on, of course, respiratory, hand and touch point hygiene, appropriate physical distancing, appropriate use of face coverings in indoor public spaces, and various other measures, then we will better be able to protect individuals, our families, and our community as a whole. One of the important keystones in our defense system is test and trace. It allows us to focus our attention on isolating individuals rather than implementing restrictions in a blanket societal fashion. This reduces the risk of spread and reduces the unnecessary inconvenience to people. The expansion of asymptomatic screening across the workforce will be hugely complemented by this additional system. And this is important to emphasize. We think there's something like 45,000 people between the ages of 20 and 65, with about 36,000 people within that group falling within the essential workforce group, and screening those individuals in a periodic fashion together with isolating positives and contact tracing in relation to the positives, supplemented by the use of this app, will be a huge step forward. The app's purpose is to allow those phones with the installed app that have been within 2 meters for more than 15 minutes of a positive individual within the last 2 weeks to be contacted automatically and asked to seek advice from the helpline to pursue appropriate management. With the introduction of this app, otherwise unidentified contacts can now be identified, increasing the efficacy of the current tracing system further. But of course, as emphasized by Julian and Tony, the efficacy of this app depends on the number of people who download it. The more people that download the app, the more benefit we can gain from it. And given the collective and robust response we have seen from islanders over the last 6 months or so, I am sure that there will be a significant uptake as we go forward. The app, as I have emphasized, does not and will not replace other tracing activities, and will not, for example, replace the importance of scanning QR codes as we go into venues, but will complement them. The app will provide us with a more accurate picture of infection in the island and therefore play a vital role in protecting islanders. So please download the app. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian, Tony and Ivan. We're now going to open the floor up for questions from the media. So the normal drill, each member of the media has 2 questions, but also for the first time this morning, members of the public can also submit comments via the Government of Jersey Facebook channel. So any questions that you may have of the app that you would like to ask our 3 speakers here, but we also have the developers. We have the technical director from Neoform, who we've worked with this app, that will also be online if there's any specifically digital and development questions that you may have. So I will just take in turn. So Alex from Channel 103, would you like to come up to the microphone and to ask your 2 questions?
Certainly, thanks, Emma. Firstly, I know a couple of us here have been invited to take part in the testing process to make sure that it sort of works for end users outside of government and Digital Jersey. Over those few weeks that trial's been running, do you know what the latest sort of numbers of users we have already, and at what point would you guys consider it to be a success where we've got a sufficient number of people to be using the app in order for it to really have a benefit for contact tracing?
Tony, I'll hand that to you.
You caught me out straight away with the first question because we don't know how many people we've tested it. We've had probably high tens, near 100 people testing it for a variety of different reasons. We've had people looking into the instructions make sense. Is it working technically? Does it work on their phone? We tested it in a range of different devices as well. As we said earlier on, there've been lots of articles published about this around the world. Initially, people said it only really works if everybody uses it. What people now realise is that it starts to have an impact as low as 15% penetration. And it's worth saying that's 15% penetration of the active population people are moving around. As Ivan said very eloquently, this is complementing the existing contact tracing system. And it only has to pick up a few missed contacts that people might have forgotten about or don't know who they are, and it can play a really important role if you test it. So, I think personally, wouldn't it be great if we broke some records in Jersey? We break lots of other records in this area. Wouldn't it be great if we can show what a small, close-knit community can achieve by getting as many people as possible to download it? Which is why we've made it as simple as possible to use. This is why we've had people review it. Nearform publish everything they do. It's completely anonymous. It does not have any tracking and tracing. It's very simple functionality. So, personally, I'd like to make sure we can get up to 50% of the active population and hopefully even higher.
And for the population that do download it, could you talk us through a little bit more as an end user what the process would be? So if you find out that you have tested positive and are notified by the contact tracing team, could you talk us through the steps that people would take and what their instructions would be from contact tracers?
So if you get a call, hopefully you won't, from the contact tracing team, say you've been tested positive, as part of the process they will go through, because there is obviously a longer process, not just the app, they will ask if you are an app user, so if you have been using the app. If you are, they will obviously take your details or your mobile phone. They will text you a code, a 6-digit code. You will key that, only sent to you, you will key that into your phone. There is a page on the app. You'll have seen it yourself, Alex. You key in that code and that sets off the notification process. I said it's an anonymous alert, so any devices that you have been in close proximity to for the previous 14 days, and that's over 15 minutes for within 2 meters or less. That's what the Bluetooth Low Energy allows Google and Apple to detect. They will get a pop-up notification which says you may have been in close proximity to someone who has now been tested positive, and they will ask you to get in touch with the contact tracing team. There is also functionality within the app that you can actually put in. If you decide you want to, you can put in your mobile phone number and request a call back. And that will pop up for the contact tracing team. They will call you up. And then they will take you through the normal process. They will identify, who you might have been in touch with without necessarily giving you those details. And they will give you advice on whether you should isolate, whether you should arrange for a test, and what you should follow. So really, the app plays a role within the existing contact tracing process.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. Gary, would you like to come up? Sure.
Morning all. Dr Muscat, given most of the positives are border arrivals, as we saw in recent days as well, I know we say we don't want this app to be mandatory for all islanders. Doesn't it just make sense from your perspective for all inbound travellers to be forced to download and use the app?
I think it should be heavily promoted. And I think every effort should be made to get them in that mindset, so it will be appropriate, if there is agreement across the board, of course, to put it to them before they arrive, as early as possible, so that they are already thinking about downloading the app when they come through the airport. And it may be reasonable to consider assisting them with that, because there will be of various age groups, I would have thought, and some may require more assistance than others. But if we did do that in the same way as we positively approach testing at the borders, if we positively approach downloading the app at the borders, I'm sure the uptake will be significant.
Julian Blazeby, how much has this cost?
It's cost in the region of £240,000 in total, from a whole range of developing with colleagues, with Digital Jersey, with marketing, and getting us prepared for the launch today. Council ministers were very supportive of the app as part of our measures, as we've described, a whole package of measures to ensure that we can protect the island as much as possible. So we believe that's a good investment, and indeed it would be a greater investment if more people take up the app. It's free for everybody to use, and we want to see, as Tony and Ivan said, more people downloading it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Julian from Bailiwick.
Hello, good morning. Perhaps one for Mr. Blazeby. I'm just wondering, is there an enforcement element behind this app as well? Perhaps for people who don't respond to the code, who don't act on it, will there be an enforcement element to this?
The issue of enforcement is all around the positive contact. So if somebody is determined positive and they're notified of that, if they don't follow the rules in terms of the app, there won't be necessarily enforcement around that. But actually there is enforcement already around somebody who's positive. So they will have to self-isolate, and there is legislation to ensure people do self-isolate. And similarly with direct contact. So the app, is, as we say, is not mandatory. We want to encourage people to use it as much as possible. But actually the legislation sits behind the positive testing, and that's what enables us to keep greater control.
And secondly, app use, smartphone use is mainly among younger people. What are you doing to ensure that the most vulnerable members of our society, who perhaps don't have a smartphone or are comfortable using an app, how are they going to benefit from this app? What are you going to do to encourage use among the most vulnerable members of society?
So firstly, I think you'd be surprised about we actually have higher smartphone usage per head of population in Jersey than the UK. So I think you'd be surprised at the range of ages of people that use it. It's worth saying that obviously, and we respect this, and we spoke to the mobile operators, families might want to make sure elderly relatives perhaps have a smartphone that's capable of running this and can set it up for them. It's very simple to set up across a wide range of phones. As we said, again, this is for the active population moving about. So I think someone who is vulnerable and shielding probably isn't moving around within the population and moving around venues because they're shielding, and so they're not going to put themselves in a position to there. But I think really importantly, as Ivan has said and I said earlier on, this is complementary. It's an extra tool in the armoury. People aren't, it will help if people have this, but for those people that do not have the app, that do not have a smartphone and not using it, they are still going to be well served by the existing contact tracing team. And I think, as I said, it is more likely that some of those people are not necessarily going to be in positions where they're coming into contact with people they don't know, in which case the app will help. So there's no perfect solution to everything. It's not a panacea. It's complementary to everything that is working well in Jersey already.
Thank you, Julian. Charlotte from BBC.
I'm going to do it from here if that's okay. I actually want to talk about the data side of it. So in the privacy agreement, it says that IP data is stored in the firewall system log for 14 days. And if suspicious activity is detected, the data may be shared with law enforcement agencies for the purposes of investigating the activity. What does this mean, and how do you reassure people that there won't be privacy violations?
So unless Julian wants to jump in on that one, I suspect that's a good question for near form.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. The information is held. The information is held in the firewall purely to allow us to identify any particular security threat being propagated against the platform. So this would be if you had rogue actors that were trying to penetrate the system. So that's the reason that information is held for that period of time. And if you did have somebody penetrate the system, that's where you could in law enforcement to help address that.
Great, thank you. And just secondly, we've obviously had some issues this morning with the Android phones, but were there any technical issues during the testing process, and have they since been resolved? And how many people downloaded and tested the app?
I'm not aware of any technical issues that we found. I mean, one of the benefits of using a tried and tested app already is that we knew the core platform worked. Most of what we've done is sort of, effectively looked to white label product. So we've put the Jersey look and feel on it, instructions, processes as well. And so most of the changes were around language and things like that. So I'm not aware of any technical issues. The issue today has been there was an issue we needed Google to fix, and Nearform might want to comment on this. They published an update, but obviously these take time to cascade through the Google Play Store. Because we had people going online this morning saying they could download the app, they couldn't get it to work, we decided to pull it until that update has gone live. But again, Nearform might want to add to that answer.
Yeah, we're working with Google at the moment just to expedite that review process. Obviously, any app change has to get reviewed by Google. It becomes available. So we expect that to be available later today.
Thank you.
Tom from JP, sorry.
Good morning. Just to clarify, Tony, a couple of your figures. The effectiveness of the app you referred as starting from a point of 15%, but that you'd hope to get up towards 50 if everyone gets on board with this. And okay, just clarifying those numbers. Yes. Thank you. And you also referred to a split that the majority of Jersey users are iPhone users rather than Android. Roughly what proportions are we talking about there?
So the last stats I saw showed about 75% of smartphone users were using Apple rather than Android. And I think potentially even a higher percentage of people who are active smartphone users and use apps and download apps and therefore are likely to be the target audience for the Jersey COVID Alert app.
Great. And regarding a call, if somebody is notified about having been in proximity to an active case, this goes back 14 days. Those of us who are out and about in the course of our work and socialising and maybe travel while we're allowed, you can be doing quite a lot during the past 14 days. My impression is that this could spread like wildfire in terms of, I don't mean the virus, but in terms of one person being close to others and their contacts are then checked. Is the scope that it'll result in a great number of messages and alerts and calls for the tracing team?
In a sense, that is the point, that we would want to spread our net as widely as possible to capture as many direct contacts as possible and test them appropriately. It is only, of course, if a direct contact turns out to be positive that we would then contact trace in relation to that individual. So that is the way it is handled from that point onwards.
So the contacts will be, it won't go beyond the contacts unless they're tested and found
Indeed.
to be positive, and it will then spread on to the next.
In relation to that individual. So when a direct contact is tested positive, they become redefined, if you like, as an index case, and testing starts from there.
Great, thank you.
Do we also have BBC Radio Jersey by Zoom or not? No? Okay. I'm now going to just take, before we hand back to the media to ask some final questions, I'm just going to, I've just been looking through some of the comments that we've got on the Facebook page and to answer some of the questions that we've got from the public. So one of the questions that we've got is about the use of Bluetooth and whether people have to have Bluetooth on all the time for the app to be working.
Yes, they do need to use Bluetooth. It uses Bluetooth low energy, and that is used within the Google and Apple operating system.
Thank you, Tony. And a question for you, Colm, is I don't know if you could maybe just explain both to the media and also to the public how you've worked with Jersey to be able to develop the app, but also with other countries such as Scotland and Ireland and areas of New York, etc., where that has been obviously launched very recently.
Ireland application, they donated the source code to the Linux Foundation, so that became Global Green. And Global Green then has been a backbone that we've built on top of for the apps for individual countries since, or the US states. We've worked very, very closely with the Jersey digital team to define exactly what we wanted in their specific app. So you can see UX and the UI and the app is very tailored towards Jersey. The language it uses fits in with the manual tracing process, because again, it's very much about augment process. So, but it's part of that existing technology that's already been tried. It's now live in 8 other jurisdictions. So you're getting the benefit of the experience that's been built to date and rolling out one of these applications.
Thank you. Another question that we have from the public is, will the app be used to track people who should be isolating and aren't?
No. But, I think it's worth saying, we said this is voluntary, no one will know you have had the alert on your phone. One assumes if someone doesn't want to cooperate, they're not going to be downloading the app in the first place and using it. But we think the important thing here, as we've said repeatedly, is to get as many people as possible to download the app, to be comfortable with it, to trust it. And as I said, it is completely anonymous, so only you will know you have received a notification. But we expect good cooperation, that people will then phone, if they've downloaded the app to use it, they will phone the contact tracing team and they will enter the process, because they will want advice on what to do.
And if I can add, we obviously do monitor and track positive cases through the contact tracing team already. They're quite forensic and very good at investigating from positives and who they've been in touch with, and we follow that up with calls and personal visits where necessary.
Thank you. We've also got another question about accessibility functionality of the app. So whether the app has users or is able to work with things like Voiceover and talk back with people who have got low vision, and how that functionality could possibly be worked either now or in the future.
That's a good question. I think I'm not aware of the answer to that myself. But I think actually one of my team is in the background. I don't know whether she can add the answer or yes. They can. Oh, yes. Okay.
So that was a yes. That will be something that will be
yes.
looked at and will be developed.
No, it's in place right now.
Okay.
So Voiceover works throughout the app, and you can also inherit the phone's operating system accessibility settings for Zoom and blowing up text, for example. We also have a setting that allows you to turn off the radar animation if you don't like motion on your app.
For those of you watching online, that was Dr. Max Burge and Rachel Weissmuller, who have done an amazing job, worked incredibly hard to get working with Nearform to get us to the point we are today. So I'd like to thank them for all their hard work.
Okay, so I will now hand back to the media for any questions that they may have. So Gary, over to you again.
I don't know who's best to answer this. Are you planning to work with the telcos to get Shaw and Airtel and JT to push a link to every mobile phone in the island, just so we can just get this sorted today and get everybody to have the app before we all go home tonight?
We actually have a text message that will be going out on Friday to all island users by text message to promote and to encourage people to download the app.
And what is your measure of success? You've spoken about from 15% it starts to have an effect. 70%, I think your slide said, stops a pandemic, which sounds extraordinary. It's not unfeasible to be able to get to 70% in this island, though. Do we know we have 70% of modern enough smartphone users, Tony?
We have talked to the telcos. We believe that the vast majority of smartphones will meet the criteria required on both Google Android phones and also on Apple. It's very difficult, as I said, you almost don't want to set yourselves up to fail. I personally think there's no reason why we shouldn't break records here. We're doing it this way. We've been able, by launching now when we need it, we've been lucky that we haven't needed it to now. By launching now, we've been able to learn lessons from around the world of what has worked and what hasn't worked. We've avoided going out with something that is overcomplicated. We've avoided going out with something that might be a bit scary for some people. And in a community like Jersey, I think if we get employers, we get, government is going to be promoting it to their own staff as the biggest employer. We get GPs getting behind this, got the medical establishment. Max is talking to his colleagues as well. I don't see why there's any reason we shouldn't start to break a few records here. But let's get going, let's get it out there, and let's see what we can do. And hopefully people like yourselves here, the media, will help promote this as well.
Very, very cheeky apologies, colleagues. Final supplementary. Julian Blazeby, it's just occurred to me. In the UK, we've heard of health workers and even police officers being urged not to use the app so that it doesn't knacker up the use of staff in those workplaces. Are you encouraging all public sector workers to use the app?
Yes, we will be, yes. There is an issue in terms of police officers, in terms of their work mobile devices, but actually if they carry their own personal devices, then we've been encouraging them to download as well. As Tony said, it's really important as the main employer on the island. We lead by example, and we will be pushing this because the benefit of the investment is one positive and a direct contact that we didn't know about. Actually, we identify through the system. That's got to be good for Islanders.
Thank you. We touched on it earlier about maybe not right now, but in a couple of weeks or months, or I think it was by the end of this month you mentioned, Tony, the app might be able to talk with other apps, the NHS one or other from Nearform. Do you know what sort of timescale we could be looking at, and what are the limitations at the minute if people are, say, going to the UK with the Jersey app or coming from the UK with the NHS app to Jersey?
So obviously, right now, if somebody, as Ivan's already said, if somebody is coming to Jersey, we will encourage them. In the process, we already follow the information we give them to download the Jersey app. One of the real benefits of going with Nearform, who've developed, as we said, for example, the Scottish version of the app, is obviously the England and Wales are under pressure to make sure their app was interoperable. So we get the benefit of going with the developer who's got a system that there is incentives to get that interoperability. There is an MOU agreed between all the different devolved authorities and nations, and we're very positive at the moment. Nearform might be able to comment, but there has been interoperability testing between the NHSX app and the Scottish version of the app, and we're getting very positive noises this could work by the end of October.
Yeah, as a follow-up on that, we are in the process of testing interoperability between the different applications. That's an ongoing process, and I guess the rollout date will be agreed fairly quite soon.
Okay, thank you.
Julian, although whilst just before you get up, I also have hot off the press to say that the issue that we did have with Android will be fixed this afternoon. So that's great news. So Julian.
Just in terms of a resourcing issue, Mr. Blazeby, do you expect the numbers of the contact tracing team to increase with potential more job opportunities for perhaps people who have lost employment during the pandemic?
We are reviewing actually the numbers in our contact tracing team at the moment. They've been pretty busy over the last number of days and working very effectively, but keeping that team under review and ensuring we've got the right resources is something that the ministers are very focused upon. And we will be looking to increase the number of people in the team. And we've got a mix of staff from environmental health officers. We've got some States Jersey police officers involved as well. And as you rightly identify, there could well be opportunities going forward for those people who have unfortunately lost jobs, particularly through the pandemic, where we can encourage them to come and work for us.
Thank you. And Dr. Muscat, with the number of tests increasing, does that increase the risk of more false positives and perhaps us moving to get what's being called a case-demic instead of an actual increase in actual people contracting COVID in the vulnerable group, hospital admissions, those sort of metrics?
Sure. So there are two types of false positives that we perceive. One is finding old virus. So you largely stop being infectious from about 14 days onwards after developing infection. And we try to identify those by doing serology tests, blood tests, on individuals who are PCR positive, who have a positive COVID swab, to determine if they've got old virus, which is not infectious because it's coated with antibody, versus early virus, which is still sort of an acute infection. So that is one way of distinguishing false positives, if you like, from true positives. The other way of decreasing false positivity is to only allow the testing system to amplify the swab fluid up to a certain level, say 35 cycle threshold would be reasonable. Above that, you start getting noise, and you don't want to go into noise. And of course, very, very, very small amounts of virus is unlikely to be infectious, so you don't really want to go there and create lots of noise. And finally, if you have low sort of low quantities of virus as defined by the amount of cycles you need to go through to achieve a positive, then testing that sample using an alternative system is one way of confirming whether you've got a true positive or not. So those are the layers we would go through to avoid a sort of a pandemic of cases tests rather than a real pandemic.
Charlotte.
Just make sure my camera's in the right place. The data is stored on the app for 14 days. How will this work if there is, for example, a delay in test results? Will we be missing crucial moments in the spreading of the virus?
Thank you. So we're now in a better situation than we were 6 months ago or thereabouts, as are other countries, of course, with a greater availability of tests. And we are dividing, if you like, or categorizing the tests that we have into essentially 3 groups. Those that do not require an immediate result. So for most surveillance testing, a 24-hour turnaround time is perfectly reasonable, and that is currently the sort of target that we're achieving with out-of-Ireland testing. With the airport laboratory testing, our average over the last week has been about a 9-hour turnaround time, which is very good. And that will be useful for arrivals for certain community infections at the moment. And additionally, we have a 1 to 2 hour turnaround time for hospital-based testing. But there is a cap on how many we can actually do in the hospital. There's a cap on all of those, but there is a very low cap of about 60 a day that we can carry out in the hospital. So we are working on the latter. And we're looking at introducing 2 additional technologies to supplement the more rapid turnaround tests so that we can test not just admissions to the hospital, whether COVID-related or not, but also community symptomatic patients to reduce the time lag between testing, identifying a positive, and going on to contact tracing. And it is worth emphasizing within this whole context that it is thought that non-symptomatic, asymptomatic patients, although constituting up to 50% of all COVID-positive patients, are only responsible for 15% of transmissions. So using the testing system in this way is logical from a number of viewpoints.
Okay, thank you. And I apologise because I may be following on from Julian, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You obviously want to record a record number of people using this app. Is this something Jersey's track and trace team will be able to handle?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we're reviewing the resources. The team have been particularly busy over the last 4 or 5 days. You'll be aware of the increase in cases we had over the weekend. But actually the team are coping well with that in terms of following down their contacts and issuing advice and instructions. So we'll keep the team under review, and if we do need to increase resources, we will.
Great, thank you. Tom, do you have any further questions?
Just one quick one for Dr. Muscat, following on from your description of the 3 different types of tests. So that the off-island testing is currently meeting a 24-hour target. We heard that towards the back end of last week there were people waiting 48, 51, 52 hours for that. Have we got past that stage, and so people can look forward to a much shorter wait for those off-island tests?
The efficiency of island testing has improved significantly, and we have recently been meeting 24 hours, but there are still occasions, as there are with everything else that we do really, times when the anticipated target is not met for one or more reasons. Obviously, sending tests off island is affected by weather conditions, for example. And I believe that it was last week, I can't quite remember now, when a lot of air traffic was affected by the weather.
Great, thank you.
Okay, just a couple more questions that we've got for the public. So, Julian, question that we have here. How are you going to ensure that visitors are self-isolating until negative results are received? The individual was speaking to some hoteliers last week, and they asked visitors to self-isolate until their day zero negative results had been received. However, a lot found that visitors were ignoring this.
I think the first thing to say is that the vast majority of people who have come into the island have complied with the guidance and advice to date, which has been welcome in terms of the public health measures. But we've had some isolated examples where people clearly haven't. Everybody now who comes from a green country has to self-isolate until they get their tests, and obviously the amber and reds are the same. And the time of self-isolation until results has dropped dramatically, as Dr Muscat has said, to around about 9 hours, so that's really positive. We will, however, be following up those people. We will be targeting and randomly calling people, even in that short period of time, up to 9 hours, to make sure they are following the advice and staying in. And then if they're not, of course, we will follow it up with visits and action. So we're confident that people are still, in the main, following the advice. And obviously now we've made it very clear publicly that from now on when people arrive, they have to self-isolate until the test is received.
Okay, and Tony, I have a question for you. Is the app completely safe, and is there any risk to our personal information?
Yes, it is completely safe. As I said, anyone who tries the app out will find that it does not ask for any personal information. It's completely anonymous. It just captures device IDs to have the ability through Google and Apple technology to alert other devices. So it doesn't track your location. It doesn't contain your personal information.
Thank you. I think we're all done. No more questions from either the media or the public. So thank you everyone for coming today, and for those of you online that have been watching. So all download the app. Thank you. Goodbye.